The ER doors burst open under flashing red lights. A SEAL admiral, still in uniform, was rushed in on a gurney, skin already turning the wrong color, breathing shallow and erratic. No blood, no visible wound, just a body shutting down fast. Doctors swarmed him, heart rate unstable, oxygen crashing, tox screens negative. Gunshot? No entry wound. Stroke? Doesn't fit. Then a rookie nurse stepped forward, leaned in, and saw something no one else did. A pin-sized mark, barely visible beneath the collarbone. Too clean, too precise. She didn't argue. She didn't ask permission. She grabbed a scalpel and cut into the Admiral's chest with hands so steady they didn't belong in a civilian hospital. Doctors shouted for her to stop, until she pulled something from inside him so thin it looked like a thread. A poison needle. She crushed it, called out a name no one recognized, and injected an antidote she knew by memory, alone. The Admiral's heart jumped back to life. The room froze. 30 minutes later, the hospital locked down. Black SUVs arrived, and the CIA asked one question. Where is the nurse who saved him? Before we begin, take a second to comment where you're watching from and subscribe. It costs nothing, but it keeps stories like this alive. The ER doors slammed open at 8:41 p.m., and the room instantly knew this wasn't routine. A SEAL admiral came through first, still in uniform, bloodless, motionless, his skin carrying a faint gray-blue tone that made seasoned trauma doctors stiffen. He wasn't bleeding, he wasn't screaming, he was dying in the quietest way imaginable. Monitors erupted anyway, heart rate erratic, oxygen saturation collapsing, muscles locking instead of relaxing. Paramedics shouted vitals that didn't line up with any normal pattern. No entry wound, no exit wound, no shrapnel, no blunt trauma, just a body shutting down faster than protocols could catch up. Doctors swarmed, 20 of them, cardiology, neuro, tox, trauma. Every specialty collided in a tight circle around the gurney, voices overlapping, orders stacking, none of them fitting. He was walking 10 minutes ago, someone said. Stroke doesn't progress this fast. Run tox again. It's clean. The Admiral's jaw clenched, his fingers curled inward like they were gripping something that wasn't there. His chest shuddered, not with panic but with restraint, with training. Then his eyes snapped open, not confused, not sedated, alert in a way civilians never are. He ripped the oxygen mask away and surged upward with strength that didn't match his vitals. A surgeon stumbled back. A tray clattered to the floor. "Don't touch me," the Admiral growled, voice raw but controlled. "Not one of you?" Security froze. Doctors hesitated. This wasn't fear. It was instinct, combat memory crashing into civilian hands. Someone reached for restraints. "No," the attending snapped. "We do this clean." The Admiral's gaze darted to corners, doorways, ceiling panels. He wasn't fighting doctors. He was scanning for a threat that had already done its damage. And while everyone else focused on calming him, a rookie nurse at the edge of the room went very still. Her name badge read, Ava. No last name anyone remembered. Night shift? Quiet, efficient. The kind of nurse doctors forgot the moment she left the room. She wasn't looking at the Admiral's face. She was looking at his skin, the way discoloration crept against blood flow, the way muscle rigidity arrived before oxygen loss, the way his pupils reacted half a second slower than they should. It wasn't textbook. It was tactical. She stepped closer. "Ma'am, step back," someone said without looking at her. She didn't. The Admiral's chest spasmed. His heart rhythm spiked, then dropped. The monitor screamed, "Hey, he's crashing!" Ava leaned in close, past the shouting, past the chaos, until her mouth was inches from the Admiral's ear. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. She whispered a short string of syllables, precise, clipped, spoken the way radio traffic is spoken when silence matters more than volume. The Admiral froze, not softened, not calmed, completely still. His breath hitched once, his jaw trembled, and then, in a voice barely holding together, he whispered back, "That code is dead." Ava didn't answer. She straightened and turned to the attending. "He's been hit with a microprojectile." The room erupted. "There's no wound. Scans are clean. You're not cleared to—" "He's poisoned," Ava said. Not louder, just certain. "And if you don't open him now, He'll be dead in under 3 minutes. The Admiral's heart stuttered, flatlined. Everything moved at once. Clear. Shock. Nothing. Ava was already scrubbing in. She didn't ask permission. She didn't explain her resume. She pulled on gloves with the ease of muscle memory and took a scalpel from a stunned surgeon who hadn't realized he'd handed it over. Where are you cutting? Someone demanded. Where the needle is, Ava replied. There is no needle. There is, she said, already making the incision. Blood welled, not arterial, not surgical, but wrong. Thick, dark, carrying something with it. Ava's fingers moved with precision that silenced the room. She parted tissue delicately, ignoring shouted objections, ignoring protocol, ignoring rank. Then she stopped, pinched something between her gloved fingers, and lifted it into the light. It was thinner than a thread, barely visible. A poison needle designed to dissolve, to disappear, to kill without leaving a story behind. Gasps rippled through the room. Antidote, Ava said. Now. We don't have... You do, she cut in. Locked cabinet, third shelf, red cap. If it's expired, he dies. Someone ran. The Admiral's heart fluttered back to life the moment the injection went in. A beat, another, then rhythm. The room didn't cheer. It just exhaled. Ava stepped back, peeling off gloves, her hands steady despite the blood streaked across them. She didn't look at the needle again. She already knew what it meant. She knew the weapon. She knew who used it. And she knew why it had been deployed tonight. Security radios crackled. Unidentified vehicles approaching. Federal plates. Multiple units. Ava's gaze flicked briefly to the doors. Too fast. They were early. Doctors began whispering. Questions layered on top of fear. What was that? How did she know? Who is she? The Admiral's eyes found Ava's again. This time, there was no confusion in them, only recognition. They didn't mean to kill me fast, he said hoarsely. They meant to watch. Ava nodded once. They always do. A doctor stepped forward, voice shaking. Nurse. Ava. Who are you? Before she could answer, the overhead lights dimmed slightly. Not power failure. Security override. An announcement echoed through the ER. Attention, hospital is now under federal lockdown. Please remain in your current locations. Outside, the distant thump of rotor blades began to vibrate through the walls. The Admiral closed his eyes, not in relief, but in understanding. They're not here for me, he said. Ava didn't deny it. She turned toward the sound of the helicopter, already knowing what was coming next. And just before the trauma bay doors sealed shut, she spoke quietly, more to herself than anyone else. They found me. The helicopter settled on the roof with a low, predatory thrum that never quite stopped vibrating through the building. It wasn't a medical evac sound. Everyone in St. Arden ER knew the difference. This one didn't ask for space. It assumed it. Security doors sealed. Elevators froze. Phones lost signal one bar at a time. Ava stood near the sink, washing blood from her hands longer than necessary, eyes fixed on the drain as if it could pull the past out with the red. Around her, the room tried to return to order. Doctors reset monitors. A nurse rehung IV fluids with hands that still trembled. Someone whispered that the Admiral's vitals were stabilizing. Someone else whispered that federal lockdowns didn't happen for routine saves. 2 men in dark suits entered the trauma bay without asking. No badges visible, no rush. The kind of calm that came from knowing every door already answered to them. One of them spoke first, voice neutral. Who performed the incision? Silence answered. The attending cleared his throat. I authorized. Ava turned. I did. The suit's eyes shifted to her. Not surprised. Not impressed. Confirming. The projectile, he said. Where is it? Ava lifted a specimen jar from the tray. Inside, the needle lay like a splinter of intent, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. The second suit nodded once and took it without ceremony. That device dissolves within 4 minutes, he said, almost conversational. You removed it at 2, a doctor swallowed. What happens at 4? Nothing, the man replied. Which is the point? The Admiral stirred on the bed. His color had returned in cautious shades, breath steadier now, eyes sharp despite the drugs. He watched the exchange like a chessboard he recognized too well. This wasn't meant to be fast, he said. They wanted me in a hospital, on cameras, dead of something no one could explain. The first suit inclined his head. Correct, sir. Ava felt it settle. The second realization, quieter but heavier than the first. This wasn't about killing a man. It was about discrediting information by killing the messenger slowly, publicly, and cleanly. "Who fired it?" the attending asked. The suits didn't answer. Instead, one turned back to Ava. "How did you identify the toxin without a screen?" She met his gaze. "Because it wasn't chemistry, it was pattern." The man studied her face, looking for bravado, ego, anything that would make this easier. To file. There was none. Just a professional answer to a professional question. "The dosage curve you're expecting is wrong," Ava continued. "It spikes again at 90 minutes. Secondary cascade. If you're tracking the shooter based on a standard timeline, you're already late." That did it. The first suit's jaw tightened. He lifted his phone and spoke in a low murmur that carried weight beyond the room. The words were clipped, coded, urgent. The Admiral's eyes narrowed. "You told them the wrong window," he said softly. "They assumed civilian medicine," Ava replied. "This wasn't built for that." A pause settled, thick, evaluative. Then the second suit asked, "Where did you learn this?" Ava didn't answer. The Admiral did. "On rooftops where people don't survive mistakes." The suits exchanged a look. A calculation shifted. Down the hall, footsteps echoed, controlled, synchronized. Not hospital staff, Marines. Their boots carried a different rhythm, one that spoke of chain of command and muscle memory. The doors at the far end opened, and the temperature in the ER seemed to drop another degree. A Marine general entered, flanked by two escorts. His uniform was immaculate, white fabric stark against the fluorescent wash, insignia catching light without trying to. He took in the room in a single sweep: doctors, suits, equipment, the Admiral on the bed. And then his gaze found Ava. It stopped there. The general didn't speak at first. He crossed the room, stopped beside the bed, and placed two fingers briefly on the Admiral's wrist. A nod. Alive. Then he turned to Ava. "You shouldn't exist," he said quietly. Ava held his eyes. Neither should he. The general's mouth twitched, not a smile, but recognition. "You were listed KIA. I know. And yet," he continued, "you identified a needle-delivered neurotoxin, designed to evade detection, removed it under pressure, and administered an antidote you shouldn't have access to." "I didn't access it," Ava said. "I remembered it." The suits shifted, uncomfortable now. This was no longer a question of procedure. It was ownership. "Clear the room," the general ordered. Doctors hesitated, then moved. Curtains closed. The noise of the ER dimmed to a distant hum. When it was just them, the Admiral, Ava, the general, and the two suits, the general spoke again. 37, he said. Ava didn't react. "Confirmed," he added, "as a medic, with a rifle when needed." The Admiral's eyes flicked to her, something like awe crossing his face. "They never told me who covered my six that night," he said, "just that an iron wolf walked me out." Ava exhaled through her nose. "You walked yourself." The general nodded once. "Your squad was wiped out." Silence. Heavy. Old. "Officially?" Ava said. One of the suits cleared his throat. "We didn't come for you," he said. "We came because the shooter miscalculated." "How?" the general asked. "He assumed the Admiral would die without revealing anything," the man replied. "He didn't anticipate a counteraction that preserved evidence." Ava's gaze sharpened. "So he stayed close." "Yes," the suit admitted. "He needed confirmation." The Admiral's fingers tightened on the sheet. He wanted to watch. "And when the needle didn't dissolve," the second suit added, "he knew someone with prior exposure intervened." Ava finished the thought. "So he's still nearby." The general looked at the suits. "Find him." "We're trying," the first said. "But here's the twist you won't like." Ava tilted her head slightly. "Say it." "The shooter wasn't hired to kill the Admiral," the man said. "He was hired to identify you." The room went very still. "The weapon," the suit continued, "was bait. A signature only one kind of operator would recognize under pressure. When you stepped forward, the signal was sent." Ava closed her eyes for a fraction of a second. Not fear, confirmation. "They burned a man to light a flare," the Admiral said. "Yes, sir." The general's voice hardened. Then this stops now. He turned to Ava. You're coming with us. No, she said calmly. A ripple of surprise. The suits glanced at each other. The general studied her, measuring resistance. We need you back, he said. Training, advisory. The country can't afford to lose. I didn't leave to be found, Ava replied. I left to stop being used. The Admiral shifted, pain flaring briefly. They didn't save me to recruit you, he said. They saved me because you're still who you were. Ava met his eyes. Then don't make this about me. The general considered that. Then he nodded. 2 years, he said. Teach, train, no field operations, no deployments. Ava shook her head. I don't re-enlist. A beat. I consult, she continued, on my terms, and I stay right where I am. The general smiled faintly. You always were stubborn. Before anyone could respond, a voice crackled through the general's radio. Tight, urgent. We have movement. Subject attempting exit via service corridors. Ava's eyes lifted. He'll head for the garage, she said. He'll want distance, not speed. The suits were already moving. The general stepped aside to let them pass. As they did, he paused and spoke low, just for Ava. You saved a life tonight, Ava nodded. I stopped a lie. Outside, alarms wailed. Not medical this time. Somewhere below, a net was tightening. Inside the trauma bay, the Admiral watched Ava with something like respect edged in guilt. They'll never stop, he said. Ava wiped her hands, calm returning like armor. They always do. Eventually. The general turned back as the doors reopened, his expression unreadable. If you're still here, he said to the room, remember what you saw tonight. Then he left. Ava stood alone for a moment, the echo of rotor blades fading overhead, the ER slowly reclaiming its rhythm. She looked once at the Admiral, alive because a trap failed, and then she went back to work. If you're still watching, comment never judge. The service corridor cameras didn't capture faces, only movement. A shadow cutting left, another hesitating, then following. A badge flash that never lingered long enough to identify. In the garage below St. Arden, the lights hummed with artificial calm. Concrete pillars, oil stains. The quiet kind of place meant to feel neutral and ended up feeling exposed. Security gates began to descend, slow by design. Never meant to stop someone who already planned their exit. The shooter didn't run. He walked. That was the first mistake. Upstairs, Ava stood at the medication station, refilling a tray she didn't need refilling. The ER noise had resumed its familiar rhythm. Monitors beeping, stretchers rolling, voices overlapping. But her focus was elsewhere. She wasn't thinking about the Admiral or the General or even the CIA officers spreading through the building like a silent tide. She was thinking about timing. Micro-projectile delivery systems relied on precision, distance, line of sight, control. The person who fired that needle had confidence bordering on arrogance, which meant he wasn't a hired gun. He was a technician, someone who believed his work was flawless because it usually was, and technicians stayed close to their work. A nurse brushed past Ava, whispering, "They say the feds caught someone." Ava didn't respond. Caught didn't mean finished. In the trauma bay, the Admiral shifted slightly, pain flickering across his face before discipline smothered it. He watched the door the way soldiers watched horizon lines, expectant, wary. "They'll bring him past here," he said quietly to no one in particular. The attending frowned. "Why would they?" "Because," the Admiral replied, "they'll want to see my face when they tell him he failed." Down in the garage, the shooter stopped near a support pillar marked with faded yellow paint. He adjusted his jacket, not nervous, just correcting weight distribution. His phone vibrated once. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The operation had already pivoted. 2 CIA officers approached from opposite sides, movements casual enough to avoid panic if someone happened to be watching. They didn't draw weapons. They didn't announce themselves. The shooter spoke first. "She's alive," he said calmly. "You underestimated her." One agent stopped a few feet away. "So did you." The shooter smiled faintly. "No, I expected intervention. I just didn't expect her to be here." The agent's jaw tightened. "You turned a hospital into a kill box." "I turned it into a sensor," the shooter corrected. Hospitals are perfect. Bright lights, controlled chaos. People act on instinct. People die, the agent said. People always die, the shooter replied. Tonight one lived. That's data. Upstairs, Ava felt it. A familiar tightening at the base of her skull, the sense of a pattern completing itself. She dried her hands and turned toward the corridor. A resident noticed. You okay? Ava nodded. They're about to make a mistake. Before the resident could ask which one, Ava was already moving. In the garage, the second CIA agent circled slightly. You wanted confirmation, she said. You got it. Yes, the shooter agreed. Iron Wolf still breathes. The name hung there, heavy. Then this ends, the first agent said. The shooter laughed softly. You think this ends with me? He reached into his pocket. Both agents moved at once. But he wasn't reaching for a weapon. He pulled out a small device, no larger than a key fob, and held it up between two fingers. Fail safe, he said. Dead drop data. If I don't walk out of here, it transmits. The agents froze. What data? One asked. Who trained her? The shooter said. What she countered. What the program actually built. Ava stepped into the garage then, unannounced, unarmed, hospital scrubs stark against concrete gray. Not accurate, she said. All three turned. The shooter's eyes widened, not in fear but in fascination. You followed the signal. I followed the silence, Ava replied. You stayed too close. The CIA agents looked between them, recalculating. You designed the needle to dissolve, Ava continued. But you forgot one thing. The shooter tilted his head. Which was? You wanted proof, she said. Not a body. The shooter smiled. Of course. And proof, Ava went on, means you needed him alive long enough to react. The shooter's smile faltered, just a fraction. You tuned the dosage so he'd stabilize briefly, Ava said. Long enough to speak, long enough to confirm. The shooter's jaw tightened. You're guessing. No, Ava said. I've done this. The Admiral's voice echoed faintly from the stairwell behind her. She's right. Everyone turned. He stood there, flanked by a Marine detail that hadn't been there a moment ago. His posture was still compromised, but his presence was intact. You didn't shoot me to kill me, the Admiral said. You shot me to flush her, the shooter exhaled slowly. You always were observant, sir. The CIA agents moved again, closer this time. You were monitoring extraction channels, Ava said, waiting for a countersignal. Yes, the shooter admitted, and when you whispered the code. You confirmed yourself, Ava finished. You didn't need me to speak. You needed me to exist. The shooter looked at her with something like admiration. You disappeared beautifully. I didn't disappear, Ava replied. I stopped being useful to you. The device in his hand began to blink. The agents raised their weapons now. Don't, Ava said. Everyone froze again, this time because her voice carried weight no badge could. If that transmits, she said, you win something that doesn't matter. The shooter arched an eyebrow. And you lose? No, Ava said. I just get dragged back into a world I left on purpose. The Admiral stepped forward. What's in the transmission? The shooter looked at him. Names, programs, methods, enough to keep people busy for years. Ava shook her head. Outdated, the shooter laughed. Nothing about you is outdated. Ava met his gaze, steady. You're wrong. The program failed. How? He demanded. Because it produced someone who walked away, she said, and still beat you. The blinking light on the device slowed. The shooter looked down at it, confused. What did you do? He asked. I adjusted your timing, Ava replied. You assumed I'd respond like an operative. And you didn't? He snapped. I responded like a medic, she said. I stabilized the patient and removed the threat. The device went dark. The garage went silent. The CIA agents moved in, swift and final, securing the shooter before he could speak again. As they led him away, he looked back at Ava one last time. They'll come for you again. Ava didn't flinch. They always do. The Admiral watched the shooter disappear through the access door. You just saved more than my life, he said quietly. Ava shook her head. I stopped a loop. The general arrived moments later. his presence filling the garage without effort. He took in the scene, the secured shooter, the quiet aftermath. "It's contained," one agent said. "For now." The general looked at Ava. "You ended it clean." Ava met his eyes. "No, I delayed it." He nodded once, accepting the truth. Sirens echoed in the distance. Not police, not ambulances, but something quieter. Transfers, handoffs. The machinery of secrecy resuming its crawl. As the agents cleared out, the Admiral turned to Ava. "They'll want answers," he said. Ava wiped her hands on a towel she'd carried down without realizing. "They always do." The general stepped closer. "And when they ask?" Ava looked past them, toward the ER doors, where patients waited who didn't care about programs or codes or ghosts. "I'll tell them the same thing I tell everyone," she said. "I did my job." The general studied her for a long moment. "And if they don't accept that?" Ava's voice was calm, too calm. "Then," she said, "they'll make the same mistake again." Above them, the hospital lights flickered, not failing, just adjusting. And somewhere in the building, a secure line rang that hadn't rung in years. The hospital returned to its rhythm the way oceans do after a storm. Uneven, unsettled, pretending nothing had happened. St. Arden ER hummed again. Carts rolled, monitors beeped, nurses laughed too loudly at small jokes because silence felt dangerous now. On the surface, the crisis was over. The SEAL Admiral was alive. The shooter was gone. The CIA had melted back into shadows like they always did. But beneath the fluorescent calm, something had shifted. Ava felt it as she washed her hands for the third time, scrubbing until her knuckles reddened. Not guilt, not fear. Recognition. The kind that followed you when a chapter you'd burned still found a way to reopen itself. Down the hall, the Admiral lay propped against pillows, color slowly returning to his face. Tubes still snaked from his chest, but his eyes were sharp, too sharp for a man who'd nearly died hours earlier. He wasn't sleeping. He was waiting. When Ava stepped into the room, he didn't speak at first. He studied her the way commanders studied terrain, quietly, thoroughly, measuring risks and losses. "You didn't hesitate," he finally said. Ava adjusted the IV without looking at him. "People confuse speed with confidence. They're not the same thing." "You knew exactly what it was," he pressed. "That needle." She paused, fingers stilling. "I've seen it before." "In Afghanistan." She didn't answer. The Admiral exhaled carefully. "They told us your unit was wiped out. No survivors." "They weren't wrong," Ava said softly. "They just didn't count me." Silence settled between them, heavy but not hostile. "I remember the briefing," he continued. "An elite Med Scout hybrid team. Experimental. High risk, high return." "Disposable," Ava corrected. He nodded once. "That too." Outside the room, two men in dark suits stood watch without pretending to be hospital staff. CIA, still waiting to see if the story ended quietly or loudly. The Admiral shifted. Pain flashed across his face, then vanished behind discipline. "They came here because you broke a pattern." Ava finally met his eyes. "No, they came because someone thought I was still theirs." "Are you?" The question wasn't aggressive. It was careful, almost hopeful. Ava shook her head. "I belong to the people bleeding in front of me, nothing more." The door opened before the Admiral could respond. A Marine general entered, dress whites immaculate, posture unyielding, presence undeniable. Two Marines followed, stopping just inside the doorway like statues. The room changed temperature. "Ava Rios," the general said, voice measured. "Or should I say, Iron Wolf?" She didn't flinch. The Admiral closed his eyes briefly, as if confirming something he already knew. "They told me you were dead," the general continued. "Then they told me you were a myth. Then they told me not to ask. And yet," Ava said quietly, "here you are." The general studied her face, searching for the soldier beneath the scrubs. "You were the best asset we ever fielded. Medic, sniper, 37 confirmed hostile eliminations under fire while treating casualties." The words hung in the air, too loud for a hospital room. "You shouldn't say that here," Ava warned. "I shouldn't say it anywhere," he agreed. "But secrets stop being secrets once they save lives." He stepped closer. We can't afford to lose you again. Ava's jaw tightened. You already did. We want you back, the general said plainly. Full reinstatement, rank restored, command protection. The CIA agents outside leaned in slightly. This was the moment they were waiting for. Ava shook her head. No. The word landed harder than gunfire. The general blinked once. You refuse? I walked away because I was tired of surviving when everyone else didn't, she said. I won't go back to being used until there's nothing left. The Admiral watched her carefully. Then what would you accept? Ava considered the question longer than anyone expected. 2 years, she said. Training only, female medics, combat casualty care, field improvisation, no kill lists, no deniability games. The general exhaled slowly. You want to teach. I want to make sure fewer people end up like me, Ava replied. The general looked at the Admiral. The Admiral gave a single nod. 2 years, the general said. And after that? Ava shrugged. Then I disappear again. A long pause followed. Finally, the general extended his hand. Deal. Ava looked at it. Then at the Marines behind him, young, capable, unaware of how much the world would ask of them. She shook his hand once, firm, final. Outside, the CIA agents turned away. Their job here was done. The narrative had stabilized. Later that night, when the ER lights dimmed and the halls quieted, Ava sat alone in the locker room. Her scrubs were folded neatly in her bag. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from release. She thought of the night her squad died, of waking to silence, of the poison they never had time to fight, of surviving because she hadn't eaten, of living because chance had chosen her. The door creaked open. The Admiral stood there, supported by a cane now stubborn as ever. You saved my life, he said. Ava didn't look up. That's my job. He smiled faintly. You always say that. You never take credit. She finally met his gaze. Credit doesn't bring people back. No, he agreed. But legacy does. He reached into his jacket and placed a small object on the bench beside her. A challenge coin, worn, old. I carried this in Afghanistan, he said. They said Iron Wolf saved my convoy once. I never met her. Ava swallowed. Now I have, he finished. He turned to leave, then paused. They'll talk about tonight. Rumors, stories. They'll say a rookie nurse did the impossible. Ava gave a small, tired smile. Let them. History remembers what it's ready for, the Admiral said. Not always the truth. When he left, Ava sat alone again, the coin heavy in her palm. The next morning, the hospital buzzed with whispers. Doctors looked at her differently. Nurses nodded with something like respect. No one asked questions out loud. Ava clocked in for her shift anyway. She treated a broken wrist, calmed a crying child, held pressure on a bleeding scalp. Ordinary heroics, quiet ones. And when her shift ended, she stepped outside into the early light, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Peace, not because the past was gone, but because it no longer owned her. If you stayed with this story to the end, I want to ask you something from the heart. Stories like Ava's don't get told because the people who live them rarely speak. They serve. They save. They disappear so others don't have to. If you believe quiet heroes deserve to be seen, if you believe the world needs more stories about courage without applause, please subscribe. It costs nothing, but it keeps stories like this alive.